Hi, I'm Jamie, and I'm going to be doing a speech about quilting. Hi, audience. Hi. Okay, so this is a quilt that I'm working on right now, and a quilt can be many different things. It can be something that you use to just keep you warm because it's cold outside, or it can be something that actually means something, like giving it to somebody or somebody giving it to you. It can actually make you feel better whenever you really need it. I made my first quilt when I was 13. I was also given a really pretty quilt when I was in the hospital after I got in my horse accident in high school. And I love my quilt and how good it feels when you finish one or making one. It's really worth it. In North Dakota, there's a lot of time spent inside during the winter time, and knowing how to make quilts and possibly knowing that other people do it that are our age might convince other people that while you're sitting inside, why not make something? or I mean, it's good. You can give it to people for a gift if you don't have anything, like, oh, a quilt today. I will show you the different steps it takes to make a quilt in like a short. There's 9 steps in my steps of making a quilt. The first step is to choose a pattern and your fabric. You don't only choose like 1 or 2 fabrics. Like on this quilt, there's a whole bunch of fabrics, as you can see, like mixed together into one. And you have to pick the pattern that it's going to be. This one's just a basic pattern, but you can pretty much pick any pattern. They come in books that give you pretty much a step-by-step process of how to cut the patterns out, how big to make them, how big you want your quilt to be. Then you have to pre-wash your fabric so that, number 1, the colors don't blend together once you make the quilt and put it in the washer. Number 2, that it doesn't shrink. Some of the fabric shrink and some of them don't. So you want to make sure they're all about an even size. So you wash it in the big bulk fabric before you even cut it. Next, you cut out the pattern into the shape that you want it to be on your quilt, and you make them about a 1/4 inch thicker than they really need to be so you have room to sew. And then you sew the pieces together and put them all together like on top of the quilt before you sew them, and then you sew them together piece by piece. That takes the longest, is sewing the pieces together, because you have to do those kind of by hand. So that really does take the longest. Next, you select the batting for your quilt. Batting is the stuff in the center that kind of makes the quilt a quilt. It's not just a piece of fabric laying there. It's the soft part in the middle. It can be any kind of material. You can choose like really thin, or you can make it really thick and fluffy. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Usually getting a fusible batting is a lot easier because you can just iron the pieces, iron the top and the bottom on. That's what I did for my first quilt. You just iron them on instead of having to sew them in or pin them in together. Then you select your backing material. I don't have my backing material up here, but it's probably going to be this material right here. The backing material goes on the back, and it's just one big piece of fabric. You don't really do the quilting on both sides. You just pick one fabric to put on the back to kind of pull it all together. And then this is when you take the 3 pieces and you either iron them together or you kind of sew them together, whichever one you choose to do. And then you use a long arm. A long arm is pretty much a giant sewing machine with a huge arm on the front, so you can reach all the way across the quilt. And you can pick a cool fabric. It has like a little design that you can pick to put into it. And this takes a lot of time, unless you have like a mechanical one. But we do ours by hand. And it's a lot of time and effort, but it's kind of fun. And then you get to add the border around the quilt. That's just to keep the edges together and keep it from fraying towards the inside. And it keeps the binding, and it doesn't look odd on the outside. And then you have a pretty quilt. Even though this one's not finished, it's okay. It's going to be pretty one day. I love making quilts, and maybe some, like, watching this can make you guys maybe want to make quilts too. See ya.